the harsh mountains of northern Albania, a horrifying gulag dates back to 1968 and the notorious reign of communist leader Enver Hoxha.
Albania had been a communist country since the 1940s, but after the death of Stalin, Albania's leader decided that the Soviet Union was straying too far from the core values of communism, so severed all ties with the Soviet Union and with China, and decided to go it alone.
The aim seemed to be for Albania to become a shining example of communism, whether its citizens liked it or not.
All criticism of the state was forbidden. And perhaps the very worst example of criticism was trying to leave, which was strictly illegal.
In 1972, Zenel Drangu fell foul of the brutal regime. He fled from Albania to neighboring Yugoslavia, but was soon extradited back to his homeland to face justice.
I was sentenced to 20 years at the age of 24, a sentence that I served here.
The regime relied on it not being questioned or criticized, and if you did, you ended up being put away in places like SPAÇ for re-education, where you were shut away from public view.
In SPAÇ prison, Zenel suffered alongside the rest.
The situation was difficult. Conditions were inhumane. It's that hard in the mines gallery, because you have all sorts of gases, smoke, and smells, almost like that of rotten bodies. It smelled acidic.
The facility was effectively a slave labor camp. The inmates were forced to work inhumanly long hours with unrealistically high productivity quotas for the mining.
And the prisoners' Spartan living quarters offered no respite, with up to 54 men sleeping in each room.
The rooms are very small, almost like cages. I mean, there's basic living, but this is something else.
Another terrifying aspect of life there was that the authorities offered time-off sentences for those who agreed to spy on their fellow prisoners. So you didn't only have to watch out for the guards and the warders.
I said nothing to my co-workers, because you never know what kind of people you'd run into. Somebody could be a good person, but somebody else could easily be someone who would report you to the command.
The prisoners had just had enough. They'd had enough of being incarcerated in dreadful conditions for trivial offences, and they fought back. They seized the warden's guns, they fortified the prison, and they took control.
The rebellion was bold and brave, but it had a fatal flaw. They were stuck up a mountain with only one road down. Waiting at the bottom was the state police. But they didn't need to storm the prison and risk their own lives. All they needed to do was cut off the prison's water supply.
The police could cut off the water supply from the bottom of the valley. And it was only a matter of time before the rebellion was quashed. Zenel had just arrived at the prison and did not play an active role, but he witnessed the surrender.
So after 3 days, they cut the water supply and the food, and they had nowhere to go, and the prisoners surrendered. They handcuffed all the prisoners. In fact, 80 of them were given additional 25-year prison terms. 4 of them were then executed by firing squad, and they showed us their pictures to stoke more terror.
Zenel was incarcerated in this prison for 14 years. SPAÇ continued to operate as a labor camp until the fall of the Albanian Communist Party in the early 1990s. Almost 20 years later, a private company started to mine here once more. Rather than forget his time imprisoned at this site, Zenel Drangu wants to turn it into a national monument.
Let's hope we will one day fix it, so that visitors who might come, especially young ones, would know what this nation went through.
Você choca do que o povo